Okay, I'm presenting on the diagnosticity of the heuristic cues. So I did this study with Bruno, and we sought to find out whether diagnosticity matters when using the heuristic approach to lie detection. Okay, so as we know, security personnel have to make a lot of decisions within a short of time, and they rely on a lot of cues to make those decisions. And the question now is, how can we reduce this number of cues whilst at the same time not compromising on accuracy of the cue? So that's where the heuristic approach comes in. And the heuristic approach was based on Gigrenze's work of heuristic, and it's based on the principle of use the best and ignore the rest. And in 4 studies, Bruno found that participants using a single cue, either detailedness or verifiability, were able to distinguish between honest and deceitful statements above chance more than participants who were asked to use all sorts of any cue. And it was left with a question we sought to answer in this particular research. And the question we sought to answer is, why does the heuristic work? Is it because the cue is simple? That's based on Street's work, the focal accounts, that if we are relying on just a few cues, we are able to free cognitive space, which is able to make us accurate in our judgment. Or is it because the cue is diagnostic? That is it because the cue is actually able to distinguish between truth and lie statements? So we searched through the literature and we found that a lot of research identified detailedness as diagnostic, and a lot of literature also, there's no conclusion on gaze aversion as being diagnostic. So we found it to be less diagnostic. And for our hypothesis, we predicted that judges relying on detailedness will differ in distinguishing between honest and deceitful statement from judges who are relying on gaze aversion. Specifically, we expected that judges relying on detailedness will be able to distinguish between honest and deceitful statement above chance, whilst judges relying on gaze aversion will not be able to distinguish between honest and deceitful statements. And we use a 2x2 design where detailedness and gaze aversion group, the cue condition is the between group, and the statement veracity is the within group. So judges had to judge both truthful and deceitful statements. So with the procedure, we first sought for ethical approval, and we pre-registered our study, and we recruited participants through UVA Lab, the university website for getting participants. And participants receive reward, the one they chose. So they could choose between money and research credit, and participants receive a Quatrix link, and they could take part in the study online. And each participant saw 12 videos, 6 deceitful videos and 6 honest videos. So with our sample size, we had 205 participants, and we excluded 34 of them for failing both attention checks. And we included 171 of the participants for our data analysis. And our sample size selection was based on Levine's work that we needed 1,000 judgments to be able to obtain a stable estimate. So for the material we use videos of narration of a mock crime study. So with this, there were two conditions in this study. One condition had to give honest statement, and the other condition had to give deceitful statement. For the honest statement, they had to do normal activities on campus and return to the lab 30 minutes later. And for the deceptive group, they had to steal an exam from the gym building in the university, and they were supposed to also come back to the lab and meet an instructor. So both groups had to come back to the lab and convince a researcher who was blind to the condition each person was in that they did not steal the exams paper. So the deceptive group were to lie about they stealing the exams paper. So with the Q conditions, both groups saw the same videos in the detailedness, but they saw different instructions. So this is what a participant will see. You will see an instruction of what detailedness is. It's about description about people, places, and how concrete these are mentioned in the video statement. And the gaze aversion, we gave a lay definition of gaze aversion. That's when the participants in the video or when the interviewee in the video looks away from the camera or the interviewer. So participants had to rate from 0 to 10. And this is the descriptive statistics of the rating. So on the whole, we had 85 participants in the detailedness group, and they rated truthful statement as more truthful statement as containing more details, and lie statement as containing less details. And for the gaze aversion, we had 86 participants, and they rated deceitful statement as having more gaze aversion and truthful statements are having less gaze aversion. So we go to the main analysis. We conducted a Bayesian ANOVA analysis. So the first part of the analysis is the frequentist analysis, and it shows that the interaction was significant and the Bayes factor was very large, indicating that the data supports an interaction model rather than the main effect. So we proceeded to do subsequent analysis. And this is the graph showing that, so the golden line is the detailedness condition, showing that a lot of participants rated the truth statement as more detailed and lie statement as less detailed. For the gaze aversion group, that's the blue line. As we can see, participants rate the lie statement as having more gaze aversion. So we also conducted Bayesian t-test to test our second hypothesis that in the detailedness group, they will be able to distinguish between truth and lie statement. And as we can see, it was significant. And here is the box plot. And the Bayes factor indicates that the data provides support for the alternative hypothesis that detailedness is able to distinguish between truth and lie statement. For our eye gaze aversion, we found out that eye gaze aversion was significant. Eye gaze aversion was just significant. However, the B factor indicated that the Bayes factor indicated that eye gaze aversion was not really the conclusion is not, it's not conclusive. We cannot conclude on it. So we need more data to be able to verify that. So we cannot rely on eye gaze aversion to distinguish between truth and lie statement. And we did further exploratory analysis to see how the cues are able to classify truth and lie statement. So as we can see, the receiver operating characteristics curve. So lines or curves closer to the diagonal lines perform at chance level. And as we can see, the blue line represents the detailedness. It performs the area under the curve, shows how accurate the Q is. And as we can see, detailedness perform at 73.5%, whilst eye gaze aversion perform at 52%. And the confidence interval for eye gaze aversion crosses the 0.5 interval. So we cannot rely on that, but eye gaze aversion accurately classify truth and lie statement. So we had 1,020 statements for classification in the detailedness group and 1,032 statements in classification for the eye gaze aversion group. So for our discussion, as we can see that people are able to distinguish between truth and honest statement when they rely on diagnostic cue rather than less diagnostic cue. And this provides support that the heuristic approach does not just rely on the simplicity of the cues, but also rely on the diagnosticity of the cue. Okay, so we prescribe this to be used in training to help reduce time and cost in training. But we should also, considering the fact that there was also false discovery, we should consider using it in collaboration with other cues. So future researchers can use other cues to, and we should also find better ways of comparing the statement. We asked participants how they compare the statement, and some said that they compared it to the previous videos they saw. Others also rely on their intuition or how detailed the content of the detail. So other researchers can use model statements to look at these. And we should also apply it in real life settings to see how best we can use the heuristic approach. I will briefly talk on some of the strengths. We use video, which is more realistic. In the airport, we see people and we have to make judgments. So the videos are close proxies. And we also use the mock crime, which is also better than the hypothetical situations and our sample size selection. Also, the weaknesses we identify is the online. We were not able to actually see whether participants were paying attention or not. And future research should use eye tracking devices to see whether participants are paying attention. And we also, the motivation to lie is not accurate in experimental researches. So in serious life, in real life, there are serious consequences to lying, which is not present in experimental settings. And we use a sample of students. So thank you. This is the preprint for the study.